Ned Stark and Stannis Baratheon have a lot of similarities when you look at them side by side. They both value honor highly, they both tend to favor black and white thinking, and they're both kind of the sullen middle child with, wild siblings above and below them. And as this commenter has continued to point out, and yet, despite all of these similarities, Ned is respected and loved, and Stannis is, considered like a wet blanket. And I would argue the reason for this is there are actually huge differences between the two when you go a little beneath the surface that make them, while similar-ish, kind of diametrically opposed. The first and biggest difference between the two of them that I think kind of bleeds out into the other things that make them different is the idea of satisfaction. And by that, I mean just, the idea of being, generally, satisfied with your life, enjoying your life, and the way that it's shaped up. And that is where these two are very, very different. Because while Ned has residual guilt for the life he now leads, because he does feel in a way that he is living the life that his older brother should have had as the original, heir, as the Lord of Winterfell, and the person who was supposed to marry Catelyn, and et cetera, Ned, at the end of the day, does like the life that he has built. He likes, loves his marriage to Catelyn. He loves his children. He enjoys his role as a Warden of the North. And that's what makes him so frustrated and so annoyed when he has to go down south and be Hand of the King, because that isn't the life he ever wanted. He wants to be in the North. He wants to be visiting, the different holdfasts of all of these northern families and showing his men respect and just continuing to live up to the ideal of what he accepted when he accepted the role as being the Warden of the North and Lord of Winterfell after his father and his brother were, killed by Aerys. Now, on the inverse, Stannis, not satisfied at all. He does not like basically any aspect of his life, it seems. Stannis in general has always been described as being uncomfortable around women, so even his own wife he doesn't particularly like, and it's stated not so subtly that as far as the marriage bed goes, he does his duty once or twice a year, and beyond that, he's not interested and doesn't want to. He does not like to spend time with her, and he just, he's I don't know, he's not a ladies' man, I don't know how else to say it. And beyond his not-so-healthy home dynamic, he has a lot of resentment towards his brother, Robert. Robert, who he feels has never given him, his due, has never acknowledged, all the stuff that Stannis did for him, remains this, very big sore spot. And Stannis, to his credit, has a point. Stannis has time and time again done very difficult tasks for Robert, and Robert has never really given a shit because he's either focused on his revelries, shall we say, or hyping up other people like his bestie Ned over here. Stannis held Storm's End as they were being starved out for a year and a half when they were reduced to boiling leather to try to get some sustenance. Stannis is the man who held it all together there until Davos finally showed up at the end and was able to smuggle them in some food. Onions, eh? Afterwards, Robert tasks him with building up a new fleet to at first take Dragonstone, and then eventually to deal with the Greyjoy rebellion when that happens a couple years later. And both times, Stannis does his job and gets no praise. In fact, he gets some ridicule for it because he didn't catch the Targaryen kids as they were being smuggled out. But what do you want the man to do? And then on top of that, instead of being granted his ancestral home as his new seat, as should be his right as the next Baratheon in line, Robert gives him Dragonstone, which, while symbolic of him being, Stannis being his heir at the time, is a less than desirable location, and also, has no tie to Stannis specifically. So instead of being rewarded with the family home, he's given the supposed nice place that comes with the titles, but it's on a rock. It's on a volcanic rock. I don't. And then while we're discussing Robert, I should say there is a lot of irony in the relationships that Robert forms, specifically his relationship with Ned. Because Ned has that similarity to Stannis, it almost feels as though Robert has replaced the brother he doesn't care for with a very similar person with just a couple of tweaks here and there. But this leads into the other major difference that I see between Ned and Stannis, and it's ironically a note that normally gets brought up as one of their similarities, and that is their unbendability. So with Stannis, we have that fun line from Donald Noy where he's describing the Baratheon brothers, and he describes Stannis as iron, which he says is strong but brittle. He will break before he bends. And I think because we see Ned hold to his ideals so strongly, there is a similar perception about him. But the irony for this is that both of them actually do bend occasionally. It's just what makes them bend that I think makes them different. So, for example, in Clash of Kings, Stannis and Renly are both pursuing the throne and are, heading towards a head-on collision. And they do. They meet, and they aren't able to work out their differences, and they know that this is going to end in some kind of battle, and one of them is going to lose. Now, to prevent the loss of troops or whatever, so that Stannis can kind of swoop in and just take most of Renly's force, they use some skullduggery. Stannis has Melisandre use her magic to, create a Stannis shadow baby and then send it over to assassinate Renly. And I should say, very clearly, whatever Stannis' reasons, especially in the case of this universe, that is wrong. And that's what makes it very ironic that Stannis is engaging in this, because the man who knows black and white, the man who knows, honor and the rule of law, is very much aware of these, cultural norms and or natural laws as they see them, and kinslaying is against all of them. But Stannis engages in kinslaying, one of the most egregious violations of natural law that is imaginable in this culture, because he sees it as a necessary task to do to follow another set of laws, which are the ones that entitle him to be the king. And so already we see Stannis kind of picking and choosing which laws he is following to the letter and which ones he sees some wiggle room in. Now, he might not like it, but he's still, we need to acknowledge that, he is breaking rules. So the man that doesn't break rules and, follows everything because he has to, because that's the rule of law, well, apparently he does have some flexibility sometime, and it's just, can he mentally justify it to himself or not? Now, interestingly, Ned also has a degree of bendability or flexibility in him that people don't always realize, but what makes him interesting, what makes him specifically different than Stannis, is what are the reasons that he is willing to be a little flexible for. So while Stannis is willing to be flexible with the rule of law in pursuit of the rule of law, or, possibly a little bit his own ambition, what he feels that he is owed, because, again, however noble you think some of Stannis' goals are, we do need to acknowledge that at the very least, there is a nugget of he feels that he is owed the kingship after Robert, and he might be right in that regard, but still, it's that personal feeling after all this resentment that's built up that I think we can all acknowledge at least influences a little bit. Ned, on the other hand, it's not for personal gain, it's almost always for protection. Ned is willing to sacrifice his honor to protect the people he loves. His bendability, his flexibility comes when the people that he loves are endangered. And so Ned, honorable Ned, whose honor is unshakable and who would never say anything false, at the very end of his life, does exactly that. Why? To protect his daughters. And I fully get why he does it. This is perfectly it's honorable to me, even if the universe might not always agree that ooh, you shouldn't tell a lie. Well, I think you could tell a lie to save your kids. I think that's perfectly valid. But this is very different than Stannis' reasoning. Again, so while on the surface we have this, we have these similarities, the reasons why and the results of them are very different. And Ned, being the type of person that would sacrifice his honor to save his kids, or, if Jon turns out to, not be his kid, again, another instance of him sacrificing his honor to protect someone that he loves, in this case his sister and her child, this all fits the bill as being, very distinct. I can never see Stannis doing that. In fact, considering what we know about Shireen from George, because remember, George has confirmed that, that isn't something he's willing to do. And at the end of the day, I think Ned comes off as someone who has sacrificed himself for his family, and people tend to like that. Anyway, have a good day. Bye.